What's going on, fellow A-plussers? It is I, your host is Adam Perez, back once again with a brand new video as we are set to go ahead and get into some DC cinematic universe talk for you guys, as we've been keeping you guys up to date over the past couple of weeks in regards to really the massive shakeup that's going on around Warner Brothers Discovery. Not only have they gotten themselves a brand new CEO in David Zaslav, he's also cutting things down at the kneecaps, trying to save the company $3 billion. Hasn't necessarily made everybody happy, but the man certainly explains that he has a 10-year plan in place, especially when it comes to the DCEU and DC films, in regards to really shaping things around and finally utilizing these DC characters to their utmost. He's also hearing from Alan Horn as an advisor. Alan Horn certainly comes from the Warner Brothers side of things years ago and helping Bob Iger, along with Kevin Feige, boost Marvel Studios to certainly where they're at. And so David Zaslav is, in fact, getting his advice. And so the search is now on, if you will, for the new Kevin Feige, if you will, that particular title of sort of DC chief executive, DC's films president, if you will. And a couple of names have definitely been thrown around. We just talked about the idea of possibly Greg Berlanti in the past 2 weeks. His name certainly being thrown around also. And so for the past couple of weeks, we've been very speculative in regards to who is going to take this particular role of the head of DC Studios, certainly moving forward, as David Zaslav really wants to make it its own studio and have the head of that studio answer simply to him, no other middleman, if you will. And so this is the trajectory that we see happening over at Marvel Studios as of right now. So very much trying to utilize their formula to be successful as well when it comes to DC. And so we've been waiting very patiently as to see who the new DC president is certainly going to be, as Walter Hamada steps down this upcoming October once Black Adam winds up arriving. We haven't known exactly who David Zaslav has certainly all talked to, but today, ladies and gentlemen, we finally have that answer, ladies and gentlemen. So let's go ahead and dive into it and just see for ourselves who exactly is currently in talks for this new DC president role. So let's go ahead and dive into this. This comes to us from Hollywood Reporter, ladies and gentlemen, saying DC's Kevin Feige found producer Dan Lin currently in talks to take control of film as well as TV for the superhero arm when it comes to Warner Brothers Discovery, ladies and gentlemen. So let's go ahead and dive into this. It does say that the move, which will see DC Films president Walter Hamada exit, comes as new Warner Brothers Discovery CEO David Zaslav seeks a reset for the brand. So let's go ahead and dive into this and see exactly how Dan Lin certainly landed this role. Has a new head of DC been found? Dan Lin, the executive turned producer who counts hits such as the live action Aladdin, which I thought was a pretty good movie, honestly. And mind you, especially when bringing in somebody like Will Smith to take over for Robin Williams, that's a pretty high bar to certainly set. So it's really great to see that he managed to help make Aladdin, if I'm not mistaken, $1 billion film. I could be wrong. The Lego movie, I was a big fan of the first one, honestly. That's, I think, maybe how I even learned of maybe Chris Pratt, to be honest with you, outside of Parks and Rec. Also, the It horror movies are certainly among his credits. I was a bigger fan of the first one than the second one, but still a really great sort of duo of films. He's currently in talks to take the role of the DC chief. Multiple sources are currently telling the Hollywood Reporter. So this is Dan Lin. It says the role would encompass overseeing not just film, but TV as well, with Lin reporting directly to Warner Brothers Discovery CEO David Zaslav. I feel like that's a lot on his plate. The idea of doing film is probably tough enough, but the idea of you being in charge of film and television, if you want a Kevin Feige, that's exactly the job that Kevin Feige is certainly doing. So we'll definitely see if Dan Lin can utilize or do both of those, if you will. It says the proposed structure would bypass 3 separate division heads. So this is the idea of him really making DC Studios its own superhero arm, as you saw in the title here, that really he only has to focus on answering to David Zaslav, and nobody else can can really kind of come in and mess around with his plans, if you will. It says Walter Hamada, the current head of DC Films, would transition out of the role, according to sources. A Warner's insider says that no negotiations are taking place and no official offer has been made, although other sources say the parties are discussing salary, reporting structure, and the future of Lin's prolific production company, Rideback. So apparently he's got his own production company that he's currently doing right now. Whether or not he pushes that to the side or maybe they roll that into Warner Brothers Discovery, who certainly knows. So it does say that insiders say no negotiations are taking place and no official offer has been made yet. So when they say they're in talks, I mean, how in talks are we here, Hollywood Reporter, right? If your sources, multiple sources are clearly saying Dan Lin is the guy, but if there's no negotiations taking place and nobody has given him an offer, how far along are these talks actually happening? It says if any deal does close, it would cap off the most intense executive searches in recent memory, one that faced scrutiny by rival Hollywood producers and executives, as well as DC fans. It says Zaslav has said that he was searching for Warner's own version of Kevin Feige, and the famed Marvel executive who has steered the rival comic book company's movie slate and then later its TV portfolio, transforming it into a multi-billion-dollar pop culture juggernaut. That is a nigh impossible task, but it didn't stop executive names from surfacing. So apparently Emma Watts proved to be an early contender, while in recent months names such as Amy Pascal, who I believe was former over at Sony, Matt Tolmach, Sean Bailey, and Greg Berlanti were rumored to be taking meetings or pushed by canny agency heads. It says Lin's name appeared late in the game, but he was championed in by Warner's advisor Alan Horn, the former Disney chair who ran Warner's as president and COO in the aughts, or in the past, if you will. Why do I gotta say aughts? It was during that latter tenure that Lin for Horn, starting as a junior exec and rising to senior VP production. He struck on his own as a producer in 2008, but not before shepherding movies such as The Departed, which was an amazing film, and 10,000 BC. I don't think I've ever seen that though. He also oversaw the infamous and aborted Justice League feature film that was to have been directed by George Miller. There's a huge story out there in regards to George Miller having created a Justice League movie, but unfortunately it was axed. It says the 2007 and 8 Writers Guild of America strike. I think that might have even been the same strike that like ruined Heroes and maybe some other television and movies or television shows that you might have been fans of. So apparently down in 2007 and 8, that that strike and a tax credit complications were factors in the derailing. So he was at one point in time seemingly helming the idea of putting together a Justice League film. I find that rather fascinating. It says Lin is a respected producer known for his smarts and in a town full of hype and egos, his willingness to find experts on the films on the fields that are not his forte. And I do think that certainly does go a very long way. Not only do you have Alan Horn as an advisor, but you also have Dan Lin that, if he certainly does come in, is open-minded enough to surround himself with people that are smarter than he is in other fields. And I think that's always speaks volumes as to who your leaders are. Not to always think that he has the answer to everything, but having other people beside him that are experts in certain fields to really give him the correct advice that he needs in the direction that he certainly needs to go. And so I think that's a marvelous sort of personality trait for somebody to have, especially in this position. It also says he has worked on franchises, that Robert Downey Jr. Franchise, Sherlock Holmes, 4 Lego movies, as well as the wildly successful 2-part adaptation of Stephen King's It. His resume ranges from big offerings such as the billion-dollar grossing Aladdin to intimate dramas such as the Oscar-nominated The Two Popes, another great film. He is coming off the early August release of Joe Coy comedy Easter Sunday. I've not had the opportunity to check that out. As far as TV experience, a key factor for the new position, Lin and his company executive produced the Lethal Weapon show that aired for 3 seasons. I don't know how that was. Walker, the reboot of Walker Texas Ranger that will begin its 3rd season on the CW. And he and his company are in post production on the big budget live action series take on Avatar: The Last Airbender on Netflix. We talked a little bit about that too on A Plus Hero Report, how that's certainly coming along. Clearly, I understand the hesitancy when it comes to that particular series, just because of the fact that I believe the creators bounced a while ago from Avatar, and Netflix decided to go ahead and continue along with the project. So that's, keep your eyes on that in regards to the TV side of things for Dan Lin. It says Lin has also shown ambitious beyond the screen. His banner Ride Back has a nonprofit arm, yada, 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 whatever. But it is unclear what would happen to Ride Back. But one scenario, according to the sources, is that Warner Bros. Discovery would take some sort of stake in the company. Ride Back would also continue to operate as a production entity. So that certainly makes sense. And then does say that if Lin were to take over, he will replace Walter Hamada. So a lot of moving pieces here, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of moving pieces here. It says Lin would join DC at a time in which Zaslav has vowed to reshape DC with a 10-year plan he hopes will allow the brand to compete with Disney-owned Marvel Studios, which has built the biggest film franchise in history. And look, at the end of the day, while they are never going to get to the point of overcoming Marvel, if you will. I will say that the idea of finally putting up some very competitive films and hopefully back to back bangers, or at least really good quality films, will certainly go a long way. So this is interesting to me. I don't know too much about Dan Lin, but if he did in fact executive produce a lot of the films and television series that they're certainly mentioning, there's definitely a lot here to certainly be very excited about, or at least have our fingers crossed. I think for me, while I don't know too much about Dan Lin, what does pop up to me is, and I take focus on, is the fact that Alan Horn himself is somebody that recruited, or at least decided to throw Dan Lin's name in the hat. Somebody that has clearly worked with him in the past. And I do trust Alan Horn's judgment just based off of his own previous involvement when it comes to Disney as well. Now, while Kevin Feige is definitely sort of the brains of the operation there, I think Alan Horn probably knows what it takes and the type of person that it takes to kind of be put in this position where they could certainly run a company like this, or at least do what David Zaslav is certainly asking of them. A couple things that jump out to me. It is one of those things David Zaslav has talked about, really wanting to not only utilize the DC characters, but you see the type of films that he's pushing forward, right? Batman 2 has been approved by Matt Reeves, which was a cinematic masterpiece in its own right. The same could certainly be said for Joker, right? And so you look at the type of movies, those are very interesting types of films that are really outside of the DCEU, but definitely have a type of cinematic standard to them. And when you look at the list of films that Dan Lin has really helped shepherd in, it being another fantastic stuff, right? I mean, we're talking about really great box office winners here, and some films that people just look at as really great cinematic films. You know what I mean? So I do think his taste will probably really align very well with David Zaslav in regards to sort of the type of worlds that he wants to certainly help create, and how he wants to sort of shape and mold this. I am kind of curious as to what his creative side is, whereas Greg Berlanti, we know that we have clearly seen the creative side of that really show itself out when it comes to Arrowverse and connective tissues in a big multiverse, right? So I am kind of curious as to how Dan Lin would certainly helm something along those lines. It sounds like he's a really great guy when it comes to film and television, and maybe green lighting and picking up on what is really good to push forward and develop. But from a creative standpoint, that is certainly where I am trying to look and see, does he, where his advantage is there, and that's I think maybe where some of my hesitancy is certainly at. But when you also have the article talk about the idea that he doesn't have a big ego, that he will surround himself with people that are smarter than him, smarter in different fields, I do wonder if he will even bring somebody in to maybe be that creative side and help him sort of shape and mold the DC films and DC studios to certainly go. Because again, this isn't just film, this is also television, right? So he's going to have to build those relationships with and JJ Abrams and anybody else that's helming stuff for either HBO Max or for the television side of things. So I will say this, I'm not going to say that this is a knock out of the park. I personally don't know really too much about Dan Lin, with the exception of what this article is certainly telling us. There are definitely some things in here that give me intrigue, excitement, a thumbs up, I can certainly say areas, but I do feel like there is comes to the creative side of things. But in the article, I'm definitely going to give him the benefit of the doubt. If it is true that Dan Lin does in fact pick up this role, it's just interesting to me that they say he's in talks, but then in a paragraph it's like no offer and no uh, negotiations have been happening. So how is he in talks at this point? We if this winds up turning out to be true, but I feel like this is probably the most concrete information that we've had, where is the very much kind of thrown out there. And I think even some sources said that they weren't even sure if Greg Berlanti was even interested in taking the role, and it doesn't necessarily seem like it either. So we'll see if we get ourselves an official announcement from Warner Brothers Discovery or even David it's that incoming Dan Lin, or maybe this information was just thrown out there to kind of get the idea in the sense of how people will certainly respond. I do think that he does get a ton of credit for somebody like Alan Horn recommending him. And so if Alan Horn recommends him, maybe he thinks he's certainly the man for the job. But we'll definitely have to see here, guys, and we'll definitely continue to keep you updated in regards to the constant shakeups and things that have happened. I mean, what Shazam 2 along with Aquaman 2 just literally got delayed and moved again. I believe Shazam this time it was supposed to dropping March of next year, and Aquaman 2, which was supposed to drop in March of next year, is now moved to December 23rd of 2023. So much, but it does feel like there are moving pieces, a plan in place, maybe trying to give themselves some time for 2023 to have some legit films that are dropping. I think they've got 3 films: Shazam, The Flash, Blue Beetle, and Aquaman 4. And that really gives you time to make announcements, start doing pre-production so that you can have things ready to say 2024, 2025. So there's really not that big of a gap, and you can keep doing business. It'll be interesting to see what Dan Lin's plan certainly is, if it turns out that he is in fact the next DC Films chief executive. But we'll definitely continue to keep you posted here, guys. But let me know, what do you guys think after hearing some of the articles, aspects of the article? Are you confident? Are you hesitant? Are you kind of neutral, kind of wait and see? Definitely go ahead and let me know your thoughts in the live chat or the comment section box below, guys. But other than that, that'll do it for me here. We'll definitely keep up with you guys later on this week. But in the meantime, do me a big favor, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and keep it A+. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.